Welcome, Dr. Maya Ziegler of Monarch Family Chiropractic. Tonight we are talking about allergies and understanding allergies and what's happening in our bodies, what's happening in the world around us that's creating an allergic reaction. And so we'll get into it, but I want to start with a story. And I think you've all heard of this, this ship called the Titanic. But in the early, let's see, I took another. So in 1912, a tragic tale of a ship that sank on its first voyage after hitting an iceberg. It was a ship, it's the first of its kind. There was actually a competition amongst, I think, a couple different builders, and the Titanic was built first of its kind, fastest, the biggest, and it was all the talk. It launched in 1911, set sail from Southampton on April 10th of 1912 with more than 2,000 people on board. Okay, so it launched on April 10th. On April 14th, 4 days after the uneventful sailing, Titanic received sporadic reports of ice from other ships. But she was sailing on calm seas on a moonless, clear sky. At 11:30 p.m., a lookout saw an iceberg coming out of sight of a slight haze dead ahead. They rang the warning bell and telephoned the bridge. The engines were quickly reversed and the ship was turned sharply. Instead of making direct impact, Titanic seemed to graze along the side of the berg, sprinkling ice fragments on the forward deck. Sensing no collision, the lookouts were relieved. They had no idea that the iceberg had a jagged underwater spur, which slashed a 300-foot gash in the hull below the ship's waterline. By the time the captain toured the damaged area, 5 compartments were already filling with seawater, and the bow of the doomed ship was alarmingly pitched downward, allowing seawater to pour from one bulkhead into the neighboring compartment. They hit it at 11:30 p.m. and the Titanic completely submerged by 2:20 a.m. I bring this up because if you looked at the handouts in the office that we are sharing this week, we are talking about the tip of the iceberg is the symptom. We have no idea what's going on underneath or how big that iceberg is. If there's a jagged piece that could take down an entire Titanic. And so when we're looking at the iceberg as it relates to our health, oftentimes the outward sign and symptoms are the tip of the iceberg. And we have to dive and look deeper as to why the symptom is there. And if we're only addressing the symptom, we're leaving a big portion of our health and well-being unaddressed. And I want you to think about allergies in that way. A lot of people experience seasonal allergies, or some food allergies year-round. But I hear most people, especially this time of year, springtime, we're hearing about allergies. And most people are on a regular treatment protocol of Claritin 45, right? We've all seen that commercial. What's your number? I'm Claritin 20. I'm Claritin 45. I'm Claritin 60, right? And it's how many days in a row are they taking Claritin to take care of their allergies? But my question I pose to you is that addressing the allergies or is that just addressing the tip of the iceberg? Because when we look at allergies, not everybody has allergies. So we have to look at, we're all exposed to the same things. We're all breathing the same air when we're walking outside. So why is it that one person is, when exposed to the allergy, is expressing symptoms and another is not? So where I'd like to start is I'd like to actually just define an allergic reaction. Okay, so an allergic reaction is we are exposed to a trigger, and that trigger creates an amplification signal of the immune system, and then we have the effect. Okay, and when we talk about the effect as it relates to the allergy, that could be coughing, sneezing, wheezing, runny nose, wet, teary eyes, right? Itchy eyes. But I want you to think about the trigger as the allergen, or what we'll call the antigen. And an antigen is just something that is foreign to the body. And when your body doesn't recognize that you are not a part of you, it sends its immune system after it, right? You are not me. You do not belong here. I'm going to take care of you. Okay. So it sends an effector cell to take care of the antigen, which is present. The most common effector cell is a mast cell, which produces about 200 mediators that create signs and symptoms of an allergic reaction. And most drug treatments are designed to suppress this effector cell, which is the mast cell. Okay. So when you're taking a Benadryl, when you're taking a Claritin, when you're taking a Zyrtec, oftentimes their sole pathway is to suppress the mast cell from expressing itself when you're exposed to the triggers, right? Now, the most common mast cell mediators, if you remember, there's 200, but these are the most common. Histamine. So an antihistamine, I'm sure you've all heard of that. That is the Claritin or the Benadryl. Antihistamine, typical symptoms of acute allergies. It produces redness, heat, swelling, right? These classic symptoms of sneezing and hives. Then you've also got serotonin. Serotonin is produced in the brain. It plays a large part in constricting blood vessels, so making those blood vessels smaller, and then increasing motility of your GI tract. So this can create some abdominal cramping or some diarrhea. Okay. Then you've got prostaglandin D2, which is more involved in respiration. So it constricts your bronchial tubes and plays a key role in wheezing when it's asthma, helps dilate your blood vessels, which can cause flushing of your skin or redness of the eyes. And then you've got leukotrienes, and they increase secretion, make bronchial tubes constrict, and contribute to the misery of asthma and hay fever. So if you are experiencing an allergic reaction, which we can call an allergy, an allergic reaction, we just oftentimes think of an allergic reaction as something that is massive and big. We need an EpiPen because we're concerned about, somebody going into potential anaphylactic shock and really succumbing to an allergy big time, right? But all of our reactions to an allergy day to day is an allergic reaction. So you can imagine that if you are exposed to something and you've got these 200, mediator effector cells that the mast cell is signaling, hey, right? If you're using Claritin, but Claritin's, it's, I don't know, oftentimes if you're using an antihistamine, but you've got other mediators that are impacting this allergic response, how well is your body going to be responding to that treatment? Not very well, right? It's just histamine is oftentimes such a big one. So now I find this interesting because here is a list of symptoms associated with allergies, which I think when we look at this list, they're surprising. So all of this information is coming from a book called The Allergy Solution. I have it here in the office if anybody would like to borrow it. So outside of the typical allergy symptoms you might, see somebody express, we got weight gain, fatigue. Fatigue is often associated with a food allergy, wheat, corn, dairy, sometimes even chocolate. Depression. They find adolescents with asthma are 3 times more likely to develop depression. Anxiety, muscle aches, joint pain. Sometimes they see cow's milk as a trigger for joint pain and allergic arthritis. Headaches, insomnia, stomach aches, bloating, constipation, diarrhea, brain fog. So again, we have to think about an allergy as more than just seasonal. It could be a food allergy. It could be a mold. Oftentimes, if you hear of anybody who's had a mold allergy, this runs rampant and really major impact to our nervous system, and takes a lot of work to help clear that. because you also have to remedy the space in which the mold is present, right? So a lot of times we're around an allergen, we don't necessarily know it in the case of mold, right? But all of those are associated with some type of allergy. Oftentimes I find most people like, oh, allergies, seasonal allergies, wheezing, coughing, sneezing, all of that. I want to address that, but there may be a deeper issue here going on. And it's not always like easy to find, or it requires some investigative work, right? The symptom is just how your body is expressing itself. You have to dive deep and understand, okay, what is going on underneath the water, right? What's the iceberg looking like? Not just the symptom. So why are we so allergic? 50 years ago, 1 in 30 people had allergies. Today, it's 1 in 3. So when you see these kinds of numbers, there's not a genetic component here. Genetics change over, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of years, millions of years. So when you see a number shift and change in such a short time frame, there's not a genetic component here. So we've got to look at what is the environmental impact? What are we exposed to that is different compared to where we were 50 years ago? And that's where we have to look at what's going on the outside, what's going on inside, and then what's going on inside our bodies. So let's start with outdoor stress. Ambient air pollution due to motor vehicle exhaust. In the 1960s, there were 74 million cars. 2002, 233 million cars. 2010, 1 billion cars worldwide. I can't even imagine what it is 14 years later. There is a lot of vehicle exhaust, which is putting out particulate matter, soot, diesel exhaust, ozone, sulfur dioxide. There's a lot more chemicals that we are breathing in the air. And this is just outside. I think we live real close to one of the heaviest intersections in the country. I think that's Colorado and Colfax. I'm not sure on that fact, actually. I know it's one of the biggest in our state. But, if we live we're right on Colorado Boulevard, right? So we have tons of cars and tons of traffic. You can imagine the air quality is different in the middle of Wyoming compared to the middle of an urban area, right? Greenhouse gases, including CO2, carbon dioxide, primarily from coal burning power plants, cars, trucks, and industry, have warmed the earth, producing greenhouse effect. So this is from Department of Public Health and Environment, Dr. Maria Netra. Consider air pollution the single greatest environmental health risk we face. In 2012 alone, exposure to indoor and outdoor pollutants killed more than 7 million people. That's 1 in 8 deaths worldwide. We never hear about air quality, or maybe we do, but not as often as we hear about, some other disease or condition. So simply, if we can change the quality of air, we can change the stress and limit the toxicity to our bodies. Indoor stress. I think they've done massive changes in, last 30, 40 years in terms of smoking indoors. But that used to be a big one, right? We had smoking inside. You ever been in one of those airports? Like I've seen this down in the South. Maybe it was like, where was it? One of the Carolinas, maybe, or Florida or something. I was walking around, then I look and there's this like glass case, and it's the smoker lounge. And this wasn't that long ago, maybe 5 years ago. I'm like, oh, there's like smoke. I was like, I want to stay away from that, right? Like the quality of air in there. Woo. But luckily that's changed. You can't smoke inside many places these days. But something to think about, formaldehyde, just the chemical that's released from any synthetic, material that we are using indoors. So composite wood, fabrics, wood floor finishes, paint, wallpaper, emissions from laser printers, copiers, and personal computers. All of these things generate, indoor exposure to toxins. So you think, well, it's like when I have an allergy, I don't want to be outside, but you also don't necessarily want to be inside. You need to have air and healthy air circulating, right? I find this interesting. Every 2.6 seconds, a new chemical substance is made or isolated. The American Chemical Society has a database of more than 50 million chemicals that are in use somewhere in the world. Cleaners, fragrances, perfumes, colognes, air fresheners, detergents, personal products, shampoos, conditioners, shaving creams, aftershave, makeup, cleansers, soaps, dryer sheets. Dryer sheets are one of the most toxic things you can use. In this book, The Allergy Solution, he talked about one of the worst places you could be is playing outside in your backyard with a dryer exhaust, with somebody using a dryer sheet. That is the worst air quality.
I love the smell of it, but
that's where you can get, I use dryer balls, and then you can also use
Yeah.
essential oils. Some people like to add some essential oils to the wool dryer balls, but when you're using those dryer sheets, there's significant chemical use there, and that's offloading into our air. In addition to clothing and fabric, fragrances are made up from up to 3,000 different chemicals, the toxicity of which is not known. So number one, you're looking at how am I walking outside and being exposed to environmental stressors, but also you've got to look at the chemical loading of what you're using on your body, what you're around, what you're wearing. All of those contribute to a body's ability or inability to handle the cumulative load, right? So, I mean, I don't know what the stat is, but you think about, they talk about women. By the time women leave their house in the morning, they've been exposed to and bathed in like so many chemicals, just because you think of, the moisturizer they're using, the makeup they're using, the perfume, the hairspray, like all of those things. Women tend to use more product than men. So there's a component that we just have to look at, what's the health of our indoor environment, and what's the health of the things that we're using on our bodies? What's the health of the things we're using to clean our spaces, right? Because all of those contribute to a cumulative load that makes us less resilient to handle stressors when we walk and are exposed to, whether it's in our foods, in our air, or in our homes.
Why new clothing fabric is saying after wash the use?
So the question is, why new clothing? Why new fabric? So a lot of the fabric that is used is made of plastics. I think there's sometimes chemical treatments that are used. If you look at, and again, this is important. We're talking about the life of children over, a chemical. But if you look at some of the, pajamas that we put our kiddos in, they're treated with a chemical in case there's a fire. It's a fire retardant. You'll see that. So, yeah, and there's a reason that that's there. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. Just that it's a component of our clothing is not natural. It's not breathable. There's some people who really kind of go down the rabbit hole of, okay, how can I purchase cotton clothing and breathable clothing and wool and, a lot of these athletic fabrics that are used. There's, I think, some controversy around wearing like a Lululemon type clothing, because a lot of women don't wear underwear when they're wearing their leggings, and so they're exposing their reproductive organs and really important tissue to these fabrics that maybe have been treated with chemicals or are not natural clothing. So I don't know if that answers your question, but it is, if you've done all this work, Bert, you're looking at, what's the next layer that I can maybe reduce my stress load? Maybe it's looking into, more clothing that is more supportive of natural health and well-being. And then we have to look at what's happening inside our bodies. So sometimes we see, I always think of this, one gentleman that I saw, and he probably got consistent chiropractic care for 2 years. And one of his major complaints, well, it wasn't like his primary, it wasn't his complaint coming into the chiropractor, because it was more like, oh, I've got neck and low back pain. But by the way, I have severe allergies. I can't go out during the day in the springtime. I'm on this, and this to help manage that. And I don't know if you're going to see me during that season because I just minimize my time outside. And he got consistent chiropractic care. And I can remember having a conversation with him saying, wow, I cannot believe how well my body is handling this spring season because my allergies are nowhere near where they usually are. And I think you might hear Dr. Kristen or, myself share some of those stories about patients who come in, again, not necessarily their primary complaint, but they start noticing that they're more resilient and less susceptible to these types of seasons or their typical allergies that they grew up with. And that's because when we look at the chiropractic adjustment, we are reconnecting the brain and body, right? We're making sure you got this continual brain-body communication that helps support higher resilience, more connectivity, more organization to how we experience the world and how we process the world. We also find that people who go to chiropractors tend to make healthier choices. So you all may have experienced this in your chiropractic journey, that you started chiropractic care and then you started learning some things and implementing things to change your lifestyle. You might be moving differently. You might be eating differently. You might start thinking about, oh, I'm going to change out my clothing, as an example. But you are just thinking in a different way and able to implement lifestyle changes that have a cumulative impact on your health and well-being. And so oftentimes when we look at what's happening inside the body, we've got to look at, do you have a body that can handle stress? Yes, the physical stress. Yes, the mental emotional stress, but also we have this chemical toxicity stress that, sometimes we see it is an adjustment that can help support that. And oftentimes we also see that there's multi-layers here where that's a component of things, and how can you address it in a more well-rounded way. So, I love this chart because if we go here, I'm just going to take my annotation here, because I like my annotation. In this upper cervical spine, this is the nerves that, your brainstem is like right here, still located within this vertebral canal of C1. So big area right here, but it's all important. So this shows you the nerves that are exiting out at each of these segments, their primary and secondary functions. Okay, their tissues, organ and gland function, and then possible symptoms that you could be experiencing. So you can look at all of these symptoms and see, oh, potentially, if you have a C1, C2, C3 subluxation, we might see allergies and congestion showing up, right? We might see low energy and fatigue. We might see trouble sleeping. We also see allergies, congestion showing up here as well. Ears and sinus infections, that'll just make it more challenging, right? So we look at what's happening within the nervous system and the brain, and what are the possible symptoms when you impinge or disconnect or interfere with how the brain communicates. And this is certainly one that we see happen with people. So we love to look at what's happening inside the body. Okay. Oops. Well, that was cool. Never done that before. Okay. So inside your body, we've got to look at, is there a nutrition deficiency? So sometimes we see if there's a deficiency in vitamin D or zinc, selenium, magnesium, vitamin E, vitamin C, essential fatty acids, or omega-3s, that could leave you in a stressed state and less resilient to responding to allergens. Okay. If you have a diet high in the major allergens, or you have a poor detoxification system, that could also contribute to your inability to handle your allergies. So if you look at the the major allergens: milk, eggs, fish, seafood, beef, pork, wheat, rye, barley, corn, soy, other beans, chocolate, nuts, peanuts, yeast. I think I must have highlighted maybe in the green the top ones, but they all can contribute to it. Alcohol, vinegar, fruit juices, commercial soup, sauces, mushrooms, nightshades, which is like tomatoes, citrus fruits, table sugar, honey, sweeteners, garlic, onion, coffee. That's a lot. So oftentimes I would pick one of the big ones. If you're like, I consume all of this stuff, I would pick one of the big ones that you consume the most. And I would do for 2 to 3 weeks, I would take it out of your diet, remove it. And then you're going to be journaling and seeing, okay, what is my body doing? What am I noticing? Am I getting as achy? Can I breathe better? But really, you've got to just isolate in your diet. And a lot of times when you look at allergens, people say, well, that's everything I eat. Well, that's why you have allergies, because everything you're eating is contributing to a constant mast cell response of these 200 mediator cells trying to get rid of the exposure, the antigen, the effector. And you're continually, exposing yourself to it, which is continually, creating some chronic inflammation and issues. So if you're really looking at, wheat is one that I would consider. Wheat, corn, soy, dairy could be certainly one. Eggs could be one. One of those I would start with. If you have a diet high in fast food, that is not natural food. I'm sure you guys have all seen the pictures of somebody who has a cheeseburger and fries from McDonald's at 20 years old that looks brand new, right? So if you are eating a diet high in fast foods, that is going to lessen your resiliency. I'm going to say to life, but particularly when we're talking about allergies, it's going to lessen your resiliency to, handle what we're exposed to on a day-to-day basis. And then you've got to look at non-organic foods. There's just pesticides, fungicides. There's so many chemicals that are used in the growing of our food, and our bodies were meant to be consuming natural things. So again, you just have to look at what is our cumulative load. And you might have somebody who I can handle eating traditionally grown food. Somebody says, I can't even do that. And you got to look at, well, they have a different health history. They've been exposed to different things, and then they have just less, less cumulative stress over here that they can handle those things, right? And then you look at drug use. Whether it's antibiotics, allergy meds, NSAIDs, antacids, 80% of antibiotic use in this country are fed to farm animals. They're not given to people. So the food that your food is consuming is what you're consuming. So you have to look at, how are your vegetables grown, and how are your, if you're eating animal protein, how are those animals taken care of and fed in their lifetime, right? And so there's, I think, a lot of things that we're going over, not necessarily addressing. I have an allergy, I'm having allergies right now. What can I do right now to help address that? And we didn't really touch on that. I'm going to see if I can put together a handout and hand it to you out in the office. We have a really great supplement. It's called D-Hist. And it is a lot of people who try it. Some people who try it, like, it didn't really work for me. But it's made up of bromelain, which is comes from pineapple. It's great for inflammation, and a couple other things. And there's some people who swear by it. Say, oh man, this stuff worked great. And what it does is it lowers your inflammation levels, and you just take it during the season. So we have D-Hist that we have here. But there's other things I can put together if you're in the middle of like allergies and you're like, I want to do something natural. I'll see if I can put something together for you. So let's circle back to where I started. because there's a lot here to really sift through and think about. And I think when it comes to allergies and really understanding your body, you've got to really sit down and understand what is my body telling me? You got to be curious. Pain is a big motivator. We get real curious when we're in pain. And yet there's a lot of other things that we could be experiencing over years that are not a big enough motivator to get us to think about things differently. And so that's where, if you do have allergies, I would really just sit down and think about, what is my toxic load? How is the air inside, or what am I using inside in my home? Or how am I spending a lot of time outside, and where am I spending that time? And where do I need to start? Do I need to clean up my air quality? Do I need to get out in nature, go out to the mountains, spend more time there? Do I need to start with, nutrition? You need to cut some things out, right? You just really need to sit and say, okay, what is my toxic loading? What's exacerbating it? Is it a seasonal allergy? Is it a food allergy? Do you think there's a deeper concern going on, that maybe you're being exposed to something at home, or just like weight gain, I'm brain fog, I can't think straight, I'm achy all over, right? There's just an investigative component here. And that's where I love this book. Let's see if I can pull it up. Yes. So this is in the Allergy Solutions book. This is just a questionnaire. And he goes through and says, okay, here's a list of symptoms. Highlight the ones that, are ones that tie to you. And then he says, okay, well, here's some other symptoms. How often do you experience those symptoms? Is it once a month, or is it more constantly? And it's using this questionnaire to really dial in, do some investigation to isolate maybe where your allergy is coming from. Yes, is it worse in the morning? Is it the weekdays? Is it on the weekends? Is it worse during your menstrual cycle? Is it seasonal, right? Is it worse when it's hot, or when the air conditioning comes on, right? So it starts to really dial in on, where some of your allergies may be coming from. So I'm happy to print this off. If you guys want to come in and say, I want a copy of that, happy to do that. So you guys can just sit with your investigative work. And my hope is, as we've gone through this, you're thinking more broadly about your health, not just the tip of the iceberg, right? The symptoms are really just that. They're telling you something's not right. And by the time you're really aware of it, there's probably a lot of other symptoms you've ignored. And so I love that you are choosing to get chiropractic care and take care of your health. And oftentimes for a lot of people, this is really the start of diving really into a bigger health journey than they have before. So the fact that you are here, you have made massive changes. You're showing up on a Tuesday night, looking at a questionnaire, thinking about being an investigator of your health. And if you have questions, or if we can support you in any way, please let me know. Like I said, I'm going to see if I can put together a handout for what you can do to address allergies more naturally. We've got DHIST here, which is great, but we're happy to support you any way we can. So if you have questions, please bring them to the office. And I look forward to answering those, look forward to connecting with you, and we'll see you next time. So Dr. Maya Kinzigler, Monarch Family Chiropractic. And the last thing I'll ask is, will you share what you know? Will you share this with somebody? Because there's a lot of people dealing with allergies out there that don't know that there's a place that can support them. That is maybe outside the box, right? Like, I have allergies. You want me to go to the chiropractor? Yes, I do. Because I've experienced relief from them, and my body's better connected and I can do other things, right? So that's my ask of you. So thanks for being here. We love and appreciate you, and I will see you next week.